My husband walked into the kitchen one evening, all casual, like nothing was wrong, and said, "We're having guests for dinner tomorrow." I nodded, thinking it was one of his work friends, or maybe a couple from the neighborhood. I even smiled and asked what I should cook. He said, "Something nice, maybe pasta." I didn't think twice. The next day I cleaned the house, set the table, made my best creamy garlic pasta, even lit candles to set the mood. Everything was perfect. I heard the doorbell ring and went to open it with a smile, only to feel my stomach twist into knots. There she stood, a woman I didn't recognize at first, tall, polished, confident. But the moment my husband stepped beside her and said, "This is Kayla, my coworker," I felt something snap inside. He didn't introduce her with the awkwardness of meeting someone new. He introduced her like he knew every inch of her. My hands went cold and my smile faded. I forced a polite greeting, but something felt so off. Throughout dinner, their eyes kept meeting like they were sharing secrets. She laughed too hard at his jokes, and he kept filling her glass, ignoring mine. I tried to keep the conversation going, pretending I didn't notice the way her hand brushed his or how he leaned in when she talked. My heart pounded with each interaction. My instinct screamed, but I stayed calm, watching, memorizing everything. It wasn't just my imagination. I could feel the tension between them, like I wasn't in my own home, but had stepped into some twisted stage play where I was the unknowing extra. After dessert, she excused herself to the bathroom. That's when I turned to him and said, "How long has this been going on?" He froze. His fork clinked against the plate. He didn't deny it, just stared at me like he'd been caught walking into a fire. "It's not what you think," he mumbled, but I already knew. Everything I'd ignored, late nights, strange texts, emotional distance, it all made sense now. Kayla returned, unaware of the storm brewing in my chest. I smiled and offered her coffee. Inside, my mind was racing. I knew this wasn't the time to scream or cry. This was the time to observe, plan, and stay 2 steps ahead. Let them think I was blind. Let them believe I was the clueless wife serving dinner, because the real game had just begun. When they left, I cleared the table with shaking hands, but my thoughts were sharp. He brought her into my home, sat her at my table, let her laugh in my face. That was his biggest mistake. Not the affair itself, but thinking I'd stay silent after that. I wasn't broken. I was boiling beneath the surface, and I was about to make sure both of them regretted ever underestimating me. As I was finishing up the final touches in the kitchen, I noticed my mother-in-law walk in, her usual tight smile plastered on her face. But today it felt different. Her eyes scanned the room like she owned it, like she was preparing for a celebration I wasn't invited to. She picked up the cutlery and started setting the table without me asking. Her movements were precise, almost theatrical, like each fork she placed was part of some private performance. She didn't say a word, but the little smirk tugging at the corner of her lips told me everything I needed to know. She knew. This wasn't just dinner for her. This was her moment. The way she straightened the napkins and adjusted the candles, it felt like she was enjoying every second, like she'd been waiting for this. For a second, I wondered if I was being paranoid, but then I caught her glancing at me with that same smug expression, and my stomach turned. She had always treated me like I was temporary, like I didn't belong in her son's life. Every holiday, every family gathering, she found ways to make me feel small, correcting my recipes, mocking my job, praising his exes right in front of me. But this was different. This was personal. She placed the wine glasses like she was preparing for royalty, her chin slightly lifted, eyes flicking to the door every few minutes, almost like she was waiting for someone special. And then it hit me. She wasn't just helping. She was in on it. She knew who was coming. The idea made my skin crawl. My hands trembled as I stirred the sauce, but I kept my face calm. I couldn't let her see that I was catching on. Not yet. When I tried to take over setting the table, she waved me off with that fake sweet tone. "No, no, dear, you've done enough. Let me help tonight." Her voice dripped with satisfaction, like she was savoring every word. I didn't argue, I just watched. She moved around like a queen preparing a feast for her guests, and I realized I wasn't one of them. Every single look, every motion, every flicker of pride in her eyes, it all screamed that she'd been waiting for this night, not just to humiliate me, but to see me crumble. But I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. She thought she'd won. She thought she was part of some master plan, and maybe she was. But I wasn't done yet. She may have smirked like she had all the power, but I had something she didn't: control over what I did next. She thought I was clueless. She thought I was just a fool making dinner. But she had no idea what I was capable of when cornered. That smirk, it wouldn't last. Not once I made my next move. The moment the door opened, I froze. She stepped in like she belonged there, like she had done this 100 times before. Her heels clicked confidently on the floor, and the first thing that hit me wasn't her voice. It was the scent, my favorite perfume. The one I wore on our anniversary, the one he used to say reminded him of us. And now here she was, wearing it like it was hers. My heart sank, but I didn't flinch. Not yet. She walked past me with a smile too wide to be polite, her eyes scanning the room like she was checking if anything had changed since her last visit. I caught her glancing at the photo of me and my husband on the shelf. Her lips curled slightly like it amused her. Then she turned to him and laughed at something he said, too loud, too familiar. It wasn't just a laugh, it was a performance. For me, she touched his arm like it was hers to touch, brushed her fingers on his back as he showed her to the table. Every move she made screamed confidence, as if she knew she had already won, as if she didn't see me as a threat. She greeted me with a fake kindness, complimented the meal I made, and then immediately asked if it was my husband's favorite. She knew the answer already. She just wanted to hear me say it. He acted like this was normal, like we were all just friends catching up, but his eyes kept shifting between us, like he was waiting for something to explode. I didn't give him that satisfaction. I smiled, I nodded, I played the good host. But inside I was screaming. She knew everything. My favorite scent, the layout of my kitchen, even the way I folded the napkins. She commented on little things only someone who'd been in my home would know. She wasn't guessing. She had been here, more than once. And the way she leaned into him, she wasn't just comfortable. She was marking her territory, in front of me, at my table, in my home. I watched her sip the wine I poured, cross her legs under the table like she belonged there, and laugh at his stories like they were private jokes between lovers. But while she thought she was showing off, she was giving me all the proof I needed. Every smirk, every inside joke, every stolen glance between them, it told me more than words ever could. She was bold because she thought I was weak. She thought I would cry or scream or fall apart. But I didn't. I let her play her part. Let them both think I was nothing more than the wife about to be replaced. But I wasn't broken. I was watching, learning, remembering every single detail. Because while she walked in wearing my perfume, she had no idea she was stepping right into my trap. Dinner started with smiles, but the tension in the room was sharp enough to cut through steel. I placed the dishes on the table, pretending not to notice the looks exchanged between my husband, his mistress, and my mother-in-law. The food was steaming, full of flavor, but none of it mattered. The air felt frozen, heavy with unspoken truce and fake laughter. It wasn't a dinner, it was a performance, and I was the only one who hadn't auditioned for a role. She sat right next to my husband, leaning in too close every time he spoke, her laugh just a little too loud. My husband, the same man who once held my hand under this table, was now pouring wine for her like she was royalty. And my mother-in-law? She was glowing, beaming even, watching the whole thing unfold with the satisfaction of someone who finally got what she wanted. They traded snide remarks wrapped in sugar. My mother-in-law would say, "Oh, she's so stylish," looking at the mistress, before adding, "You should try wearing something like that sometime." My husband chuckled, not even hiding it. Then the mistress chimed in about how the roast reminded her of something he once made for her. He smiled. My fork nearly snapped in my hand, but I kept my face still. Every bite I took tasted like betrayal. Every word they said felt like an arrow. They weren't even trying to hide it. My mother-in-law passed her more mashed potatoes like they were old friends, ignoring me completely. My husband asked if she needed more wine, more napkins, more anything, while I sat there invisible, watching my own life unravel at my table. The mistress talked like she had history here. "Oh, I love this table," she said, running her fingers along the edge. My mother-in-law nodded, smiling proudly, like she had given her a tour herself. My husband didn't stop her. He just smiled like this chaos was perfectly normal. It wasn't a slip-up. It was intentional. This whole dinner was a show, and I was the audience meant to crumble. But I didn't. I stayed calm. I ate. I nodded. I let them believe they were winning. They mistook my silence for weakness. But I wasn't broken. I was calculating. Every insult, every smug smile, every mocking compliment, I logged it all. My mother-in-law thought she'd finally erased me. My husband thought he'd humiliated me. And the mistress thought she'd stolen something permanent. But none of them knew what was coming. Because while they were busy serving betrayal on fine china, I was already planning the final course, and it wasn't going to be sweet. What none of them realized that night was I wasn't clueless. I wasn't shocked. I wasn't blindsided. I had known for weeks. The late nights, the changed passwords, the whispered phone calls. At first, I thought I was imagining things. But one night, while he was in the shower, I checked his phone, and there it was. A message from her, calling him babe and thanking him for the necklace. A necklace I never received. From that moment, I stopped guessing and started collecting. I saved the texts. I printed the receipts. He had used our joint account to buy her gifts, perfume, jewelry, even hotel stays. I placed tiny cameras in the living room and the guest bathroom. I knew her voice, the way she laughed when she thought no one else could hear. I had her on video walking into my home when I was away visiting my sister. She wore my robe. She drank my wine. She kissed my husband like it was nothing. I didn't confront him. Not yet. I played the part, smiled when he walked in late, acted understanding when he said work was stressful. I even pretended to believe his lies about the business dinners, all while building my case. I wasn't just angry, I was focused. They thought they were smart, moving in secret, but I had every angle covered. I made backups, one copy hidden in the garage, another on a cloud drive under a fake name, just in case. I even visited a lawyer, quietly. I didn't cry in his office. I showed him proof, receipts, screenshots, videos. He looked at me and said, "You're already 10 steps ahead." That's when I knew I was ready. So when my husband casually said, "We're having guests for dinner," I already had a feeling. And when she walked through that door wearing my perfume, I wasn't surprised. It confirmed everything I knew. But I didn't flinch. Because this wasn't just their show, it was mine too. I had already planned how I'd end it. Not with a scream, not with a fight, but with a calm, clear finale they'd never forget. That dinner, it wasn't for me to suffer through. It was the perfect stage for my reveal. Every cruel word, every smug glance, every insult from my mother-in-law only made my plan sweeter. Because while they thought I was sitting there quietly breaking, I was actually watching them walk right into my trap. They had no idea the night they chose to humiliate me was the same night I'd show them who I really was. They underestimated me, but they forgot one thing. When a woman knows the truth and stays quiet, she's not scared. She's preparing, and I was more than ready. The moment I had all the proof I needed, my plan kicked into action. I didn't need to shout, cry, or confront them. I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. I moved in silence like a shadow, calculating every step. That same morning, I woke up early, before he could even blink. I took my time, carefully going through the motions, making sure everything was in place. First, I changed the locks. I didn't just change the front door, I changed every single lock in the house. Every door, every window, everything he could possibly think to use to get in. I wanted him to feel that sense of helplessness the moment he tried to come home. I wasn't just locking him out physically, I was locking him out of my life. The house was mine, and I wanted him to know it. Next, I took action on the accounts. I knew where the money was, and I knew what he was trying to do. Drain it all, sneakily siphoning funds into accounts that weren't even his. But not today. Today, I cleared out the accounts I legally owned. I didn't take everything, just enough to make sure I could stand on my own, without his interference. It wasn't about the money. It was about showing him that I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. Every dollar I took was a reminder to him that I was no longer his fool. Then came the divorce papers. I had them ready. The lawyer had them ready. I didn't waste time, not for 1 second. I filed them that morning before he could even start his day. I wanted him to have no warning, no chance to beg or plead. I didn't need a dramatic showdown. I wanted him to be blindsided. The papers were filed and I was officially done. It wasn't just the end of our marriage. It was the end of him thinking he could get away with anything. I was taking control of my life, and I wasn't asking for permission. By the time he came home, everything was set. The locks had been changed, the accounts had been cleared, and the papers were filed. He walked through the door with a smile, probably expecting to pick up where he left off. But all he found was an empty house. No apology, no explanation, just a quiet, undeniable truth. When he tried to reach me, when he tried to beg, I didn't answer. I didn't even respond. My silence was louder than anything I could have said. He had crossed the line, and now I was showing him exactly how it felt to be on the other side. My revenge wasn't about revenge at all. It was about taking back what was mine. My peace, my freedom, and my future. And in that silence, I knew he'd never see it coming. The dinner was winding down. but the atmosphere was still thick with tension. My husband, the mistress, and my mother-in-law were all smiles, pretending like everything was fine. But I could feel the weight of the moment hanging in the air. I knew what I had to do, and I was ready. I stood up slowly, making sure all eyes were on me. The room fell silent, and I could practically hear their heartbeats. I wasn't nervous, not one bit. I had already won, and now it was time for them to understand just how deep the game went. I raised my glass, letting the quiet stretch for a few seconds before I spoke. "Thank you," I said, my voice steady, calm. "Thank you both for making things so much easier for me." I paused, letting the words sink in. I could see the shock in my husband's eyes, the confusion on the mistress's face, and the smug satisfaction flickering in my mother-in-law's expression. They didn't understand yet, but they would soon. I raised my glass higher, a toast to the twisted situation they thought they had controlled. "You've made it all so simple," I continued, "and for that, I truly appreciate it." I could see my husband's mouth open slightly as if he wanted to say something, but he couldn't form the words. The mistress looked at me, her smile faltering. And my mother-in-law? She just stared, her eyes narrowing as the realization hit her. They were waiting for me to laugh, to break down, to beg. But I wasn't that woman anymore. With a calm I didn't even know I had, I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. It was thick, official-looking. My husband's face went pale as I slid it across the table to him. He didn't move at first, unsure of what was coming. His fingers hovered over it, but he didn't touch it. The mistress, still clueless, glanced at the envelope and then back at me, wondering what game I was playing. "I think you'll find this interesting," I said, my voice dripping with a quiet, satisfied confidence. "It's a little something from me." I waited, enjoying every second of their confusion. The moment of power was mine. Finally, he picked up the envelope, his hands shaking. I watched as he pulled out the divorce papers, his eyes scanning them in disbelief. His mouth went dry, and I could see his thoughts racing. My mother-in-law's face twisted in shock as she finally understood that the situation had flipped. The mistress just stared, unsure of how to process the fact that the woman she had so easily replaced had just wiped the floor with her. The silence stretched on. My husband opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. He looked at the papers, back at me, and then at the mistress. There was nothing left to say. It was over. Not with a bang, not with a fight, but with a calm, controlled truth. I had taken my power back. I sat back down, smiling sweetly. Not a trace of anger in me. "Dessert," I said softly, as the weight of the moment settled on all of them. And as they sat there, stunned and speechless, I knew this was the final course they'd never forget. The moment they saw the divorce papers, I could feel the tension in the room. The mistress's face turned ghostly pale, as if all the color had drained from her in an instant. She tried to regain her composure, but it was too late. The shock was written all over her. Her hands shook as she fumbled with her glass, trying to look nonchalant, but nothing could hide her panic. My husband, on the other hand, tried to play it off with a forced laugh, like he could still control the situation, but his nervous laughter only made it worse. My mother-in-law, however, was the most interesting. Her smug smile vanished in a split second, replaced by a look of pure disbelief. It was as if she had swallowed a whole glass of broken glass. Sharp, painful, and completely unexpected. She blinked a few times, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, trying to process what was happening. She thought she had everything figured out, controlling the situation behind the scenes, but now she was facing the consequences. She couldn't hide her shock, and for the first time, I saw her truly scared. I savored every second of their reactions. The discomfort, the confusion, the realization that they weren't as untouchable as they thought. They all looked at each other, and then at me, like I was some kind of puzzle they couldn't solve. But the best was yet to come. I leaned back in my chair, taking a deep breath, letting the silence stretch for a moment. They were all waiting for me to speak, probably thinking I'd gloat or say something vindictive, but I didn't. Instead, I simply smiled and said, "Oh, and just so you know, I updated my will this morning." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. My husband's face froze. His eyes darted around the table, his nervous laughter evaporating. The mistress's jaw dropped, her eyes wide with confusion. And my mother-in-law? She actually gasped. She didn't know how to respond. The power had shifted completely. I wasn't just cutting him out of my life. I was cutting him out of everything. The house, the accounts, everything I had worked for. All of it was mine now, and he was going to watch it slip through his fingers. His face paled even further as the reality sank in. No more hidden gifts, no more secret accounts. I was done being his fool. The mistress, who had been playing her part so smugly, now looked like a deer caught in headlights. My mother-in-law, who had always thought she could control everything, now realized she had underestimated me. Her carefully constructed web was falling apart right in front of her. She had tried to manipulate me, tried to pit me against my husband, but I had been 10 steps ahead the entire time. I didn't need to say much more. Their reactions were delicious, better than any dessert they could have ever served. Their fear, confusion, and shock were exactly what I wanted to see. It was the taste of justice. The tension in the room was unbearable, but I could feel the weight of it shifting in my favor with every second that passed. I had made my point. I had done what I came to do, and now it was time for me to leave. I stood up slowly, letting the silence wrap around me like a cloak. All eyes were on me. My husband, his face still frozen in shock, barely seemed to register that I was leaving. The mistress was still sitting there, wide-eyed and frozen, trying to process everything that had just happened. My mother-in-law looked like she was about to burst from the anger and frustration building inside her, but none of it mattered to me anymore. With one last glance around the table, I straightened my shoulders and walked toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the silence. I could feel their eyes on my back, the weight of their disbelief and confusion, but I didn't care. I had finally taken control of my life, and nothing they said or did could take that away from me. As I reached the door, I felt the keys to my new apartment in my hand. It was a simple gesture, but it was everything. The keys represented my freedom, my new beginning. I had worked hard to get here. I had planned this moment for weeks, and now I was walking away from the life I once knew, leaving behind all the betrayal, the lies, and the heartbreak. I didn't need a dramatic exit or a confrontation. I didn't need to say anything more. The message was clear. I was done. I had nothing left to prove. I had taken back control of my life, and I was walking away with my head high. No regrets, no second guessing. The sound of the door clicking shut behind me felt like the final chapter of a book being closed. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I breathed in deeply, feeling lighter than I had in years. I wasn't running away. I wasn't hiding. I was moving on, taking the first step toward a better, freer life. I could already picture what was ahead. No more pretending, no more holding back. Just me in my new apartment, starting over. I had reclaimed my dignity, my power, and my future. And as I walked away, I knew that they were still sitting there, stunned, grappling with the fallout from their own actions. But I didn't care. The world was wide open, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I had done what I needed to do, and now I was free. No more waiting around for things to change. I was making the change. I was in control. And with every step, I was leaving the old me behind, walking toward a future I could finally call my own. They thought they had me figured out. They thought they could break me, humiliate me, and make me the villain in this twisted story. But the joke was on them. The whole time they thought they were controlling the situation, I was quietly letting them dig their own graves, one comment at a time, one look at a time. Dinner had been their stage, a performance where they tried to play their parts. My husband and his mistress, playing the role of a happy couple, flaunting their affair in front of me as if I didn't know. My mother-in-law sitting there like the proud puppet master, trying to stir the pot and watch me crumble. They all thought I would break under the pressure, that I would cry, scream, or beg for answers. But I didn't. I stayed calm. I stayed composed, because I knew the truth. They weren't the ones with power. I was. Every word they spoke, every smug glance they exchanged, was just another layer of the trap I was setting for them. They wanted to break me publicly, humiliate me in front of everyone at that table, and make me feel like the fool. But what they didn't realize was that I had already broken free. Not in a loud, dramatic way, but in a quiet, private rebellion that left them spinning. While they tried to tear me down with their fake smiles and taunts, I simply let them talk. I let them expose themselves for who they really were. Selfish, manipulative, and completely blind to the consequences of their actions. They had no idea that I already had everything I needed. Proof of their betrayal, evidence of their lies, and it was all about to come crashing down on them. I didn't need to raise my voice. I didn't need to argue or fight. I just had to watch them unravel as they tried to play their game. The more they tried to manipulate the situation, the more they exposed their true nature. They didn't see the real power wasn't in controlling the narrative. It was in walking away from it altogether. They were too focused on their own egos, thinking they could make me the victim. But in the end, I wasn't the one who would suffer. They were. They were the ones who would have to face the consequences of their actions, not me. By the time I walked out of that dinner, I had already won. They were left sitting there, confused, angry, and unsure of what had just happened. They thought they were the ones in control, but I was the one who had pulled the strings from the shadows. I didn't need to be loud or dramatic. I didn't need to break down in front of them. I had already broken free, quietly and privately. And in the process, I had taken back everything they thought they could take from me. They wanted to break me. But in the end, it was them who dug their own graves, one shallow lie at a time. If you enjoyed the revenge story, like, share, comment, and subscribe to World Revenge Stories, where every tale is a new saga of revenge.